Welcome to another episode of WSTM, a podcast where we discuss stories of humanhood, real life situations that most of us experience in silence. Today, my guest is Suzette Arce. She's an awesome human being, a sweet friend, and a mama to Maximiliano, who just turned 1, right?
Yeah, on the 17th of September.
A year. What a year it has been, huh?
I know it's been a lot. It's been hectic.
How are you feeling right now? Like now you're like a
Uh,
year out and he turned 1 and like what tell me what you're feeling.
I was feeling uh very overcome with emotion just looking back at how far he's come. Um Looking back at everything that happened, and there was no guarantee he'd make it this far. There was no guarantee that we'd
Mhm.
have a happy, healthy baby here at home with us. Not every NICU story has a happy ending. So, and of course, I was looking through pictures and seeing just how small he was, and you know, y- we see him every day, so you kind of forget. You forget like how little he was and how tiny. I mean, so when Max was born, he was 2 pounds, 13 inches.
Give us a little bit of a background about
Sure, sure.
Maximiliano, about your story, wherever you want to start.
Yeah, so my now husband and I found out that we were pregnant in April of 2020, and I'm very healthy. He's very healthy. There had never been any foreseen issues. We were having a great pregnancy. I was having a great pregnancy. I loved being pregnant. I loved that phase of our lives together. And then at about 19 weeks, I went for what I thought was a, standard ultrasound. And they said that your that my cervix was short, and that there was if they didn't intervene, that the baby would come too soon and you know may not uh, may not survive. So
Okay.
at that point, that day, we went from the doctor's office to the hospital, and I had a procedure performed, which is called a cervical cerclage. And basically, it's a stitch in your cervix that is supposed to, try to keep the baby in longer.
Was
And
it painful for you?
No, it was not physically painful. It was emotionally painful and stressful and very
Right, of
anxiety
course.
inducing. But I tried to be as calm as possible, and the team that we were with was very supportive. I remember the anesthesiologists were very, um, you know, just very gentle with me. um, so I had the cerclage performed, and uh, basically it's like a waiting game, wait and see. Did it work? Did it not work? Some women have the procedure done and go to full term, and some don't.
Let me ask you, do you know
Mhm.
what the odds are on that generally? Like, is it like a 50-50 kind of thing that the procedure works out?
Um,
Or, like, if you know anything
it's
about
really hard.
that?
It's hard to say because there's so many different possibilities. But generally
Okay.
speaking, it helps prolong the pregnancy.
Okay.
So,
No worries. Go ahead.
so,
I can still hear you. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So the
Aw.
so the uh,
Hi.
so 2 weeks later, we went back for a follow-up visit, and
Okay.
they performed the ultrasound, and I could just see in the technician's face that something was not right. And they leave, she goes, I have to go get the doctor. I'll be right back. And she leaves the room, and I turn to Eduardo, my partner, and I say, something's wrong. Something's not right. Um, so the doctor comes in and very abruptly tells me, um, you need to go to the hospital now. You need to go right now to the hospital.
Wow.
So, like, and I was like, can I stop at the house? Like, can I get my stuff? And he's like, nope, you go straight to the hospital. Your cervix is still very short, and there's a very real possibility that the baby can come out now. And at this point, I was only,
Wow.
20 weeks or so, 21, 20, 20 about 21 weeks. Um, and at that point, if the baby had been born, it was like basically a 0% chance of survival. Um,
Okay.
so we head over to the hospital and they admit me and they put me in what's called the antepartum unit. Postpartum, this is antepartum, prepartum, um,
The
you know,
opposite, to not
right,
deliver. Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
And basically, I was placed on bed rest. Um, I was in the hospital in the antepartum unit for, I think it was like 26 days, almost a full month.
And when they put you in there, did they
hmm
give you a time that you were supposed to spend there, or were they just kind of like, you're going to be here, we're going to be monitoring
It's
you, like no, nothing definite?
it's a wait. It was a wait and see. Wait and see. They said if we can get
Okay.
you to 28 weeks, if we can get you to 30 weeks, maybe we'll send you home. Um,
Okay.
they were telling me stories about oh, there was a woman here a few months ago, and she went home and she ended up having to get induced because she went past her due date. And but basically, it's a waiting game. It's a wait and see game.
Hmm.
Um, but I knew I was going to be there for a while. It wasn't going to be a day, it wasn't going to be a week. Um, it was going to be at least until I got to the um, safe zone, or until I delivered. Um,
Okay.
and it was a oh, crazy time in the hospital during COVID, during a pandemic, being isolated from your support system, from your friends, from your family, uh, not knowing what's going to happen. Uh, every day
What
they would, yeah.
what month
This
and
was like
year is this now? If you could just
this
give us a
is
time
right.
frame.
So I found out this was August of 20. Uh, I'm sorry, August of 2021. I think I said 2020 before. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But August of 2021,
That's okay.
we found out we were pregnant in April.
Mhm.
Um, and then in August is when I ended up in the hospital, and I was there
Okay.
until I delivered. But during that time in the antepartum unit, they're checking your vitals, they're checking the baby, they're, giving you sonograms, they're just monitoring you, just trying to make you as comfortable as possible, and, and trying to keep you as pregnant as long as possible. Um, and during that
Now,
time,
while you're
yeah.
there,
hmm
I mean, while you're there, I can't even fathom, the amount of like fear, anxiety, and all these
Yeah.
things you're experiencing. Being in the midst of the pandemic and just like on a personal front. How are you dealing with this? Like, you can't even have your family visit you. How are you spending your days in the hospital?
The only two people I could see, I could have two visitors, and so my mother and my husband.
Mm.
The two of them were the ones, and they, so someone was with me almost every single day. I wasn't alone, but you didn't have the same support system. You're not in your room, you're not in your house, you're not in your bed. Um, and during that time, I had all these. Uh, I'm going to make the best of my time. I'm going to learn a language. I'm going to read these books that I never read. I'm going to watch these TV shows that everyone says are so great that I'm going to catch up on. But really, all I did was uh, watch the same shows like that I had always watched, repeats, because I think my mind just needed that comfort level, no new
Mm-hmm.
information. Uh, so I would sit, I'd watch TV, I'd I'd talk to people on the phone, I would text, but it was very isolating and it was very lonely. Just give me 1 minute. I'm gonna see if I can put the baby down.
That's okay.
But
That's okay.
okay,
Go ahead.
come here, buddy. He needs a nap. Hold
No worries. Go ahead.
on. Okay, come here, buddy. I know, but he's okay. He just needs a minute to calm down. So as I was saying, I was in this time in the hospital, just so isolated, and I mean, granted, I had a really nice room. I didn't have any roommates. I had my private room, the big bathroom, and these big windows overlooking, all these trees and everything, and so I don't want to paint a picture that I was locked in a tower somewhere, um, but
Yeah.
but you want to be home. You want to be. But in my mind, I said, I'll stay here
Not the greatest
forever.
circumstances. Yeah.
Right. But in my mind, I'm like, I'll stay here
Yeah.
forever if that means that I can have a healthy baby. I'll stay here as long as I need.
Of course.
Um, and during they had told me that like prior to the pandemic, they would do many more things to keep the women like entertained and occupied, and they would have kind of like group sessions, and they would have people coming in and giving manicures and things like that, just kind of to keep morale up. But given the circumstances, it was really just stay in your room. Sometimes I would get to walk down the hall and make myself a cup of coffee or something. But basically, I was just locked in a room every day, all day, other than the doctors coming in.
Did you have to wear a mask the whole time?
Not while I was in
Okay.
my room. Once I left the room, yes, we would have to wear a mask. Um,
Okay. Okay.
when I first got there, uh, the the NICU team came to see me, and they had a conversation with me about, kind of worst case scenario. Uh, what happens if I give birth at 22 weeks? What happens if I give birth at 23 weeks, where the chances of survival are extremely low? And they said, um, you know, if the baby comes prior to X date, we can either do everything that we can to try to keep the baby alive as long as possible, even knowing that he's not going to have any quality of life. He's not going to survive very long. Or
Okay.
we can not intervene and give you and your child time together, as much time as you have together, to enjoy your whatever, not enjoy, but to be together during that time. Do you want us to rip him, basically, do you want us to rip him out of your arms and start doing all these things to him, or do you want us to just leave you and your family together? And they had the conversation with me, and I was alone. My husband was at work at that moment, and I just remember thinking, what an impossible choice to make, and not that there's a right or wrong answer, but in my heart, I knew that if he was going to be born underdeveloped, underdeveloped lungs, if he was only going to be able to live a few hours anyway, I didn't want him hooked up to machines. I didn't want him, being poked and prodded like some science experiment. I just wanted to be with him as long as we could. So that's what I told the team. If I give birth this week, this is what I want.
Now,
And it was,
can I
yeah,
just
of
pause you for
course.
1 second?
Yeah.
I just want to ask, because you're saying this whole team came in, and then telling you this information, and they want you to like make a decision. You're by yourself. You don't have your husband next to you. This is an impossible decision to make, as you said. How many people are sitting there with you? Like, because this sounds
I think
like
it was
an
like three or
incredibly
four.
intimidating. Any reason why? I guess I would imagine somebody would want to receive this kind of information with their partner next to them. Did they ever give you an option? Do you wish they had, or was it just kind of like, here we are to give you this info and
Um,
that's it?
well, I had, this is the NICU team, and they're busy. They're saving babies all day, every day.
Okay.
You know, and
Okay.
quite frankly, I don't even think that they were ready to come see me. I insisted. I was like, when they're ready, when they have a minute, tell them to come see me. So it just happened
Okay.
to be the timing of this is when they had free time. That's when they could come see us. But
Okay.
everyone on the team, from every nurse, every doctor, uh, was so unbelievably kind, unbelievably supportive. It's a teaching hospital too, so it's a lot of young doctors. It's it's their
Okay.
they're with the like the head resident doctor or what have you, but or no, that's not how you say it. The attending. They're with the attending doctor. They're the resident doctors. Um, and a lot of them, this is their I might be their first NICU patient or high risk patient, or so they were all incredibly gentle with me. It
Okay.
they made it as they were as comforting as they could be given the circumstances, that they're like, we'll do whatever you want us to do. We're here for you, like you're the boss. um, and we're just here to support you and to what tell you what's going on. We want to be honest with you, we want to be forthcoming with you, but but you're in the driver's seat, so to speak. um, and the antepartum nurses, if you've ever been in a hospital, maybe you're there a day, a week, you know they all switch shifts. Maybe you see the same person once or twice. I was there for a month and I saw the same people every day, and you develop a relationship and you develop um, rapport with them. And I couldn't be more grateful for how I was treated while I was in the hospital. Given the circumstances of everything going on, not having your support system, not having my siblings, not being, I mean, you know my family, you know how incredibly close we are. Uh, I don't think I
Mm-hmm.
had ever gone a month without seeing my brothers.
Yeah.
So it was without seeing my sister-in-laws, Sabrina, Emily. Um, so
Yeah.
it was incredibly isolating, and they became my pseudo family while I was there. Um, and again, the goal was to keep me pregnant, and you're there every day and alone with your thoughts. While if there were plenty of times that I was in there by myself, and your mind starts to wander and you start to think of uh, all the possibilities of all the scenarios that could happen. Um, and even though realistically I knew there wasn't anything that I had done to bring about this situation, um, you're filled with guilt. You know, you feel like your body has failed you. Like you had one job, to keep this baby in. And I had imagined having this big belly and, wearing all the cute maternity clothes and having a baby shower and all these things that you dream that your pregnancy is going to be. And all of that was taken from me. I didn't get to have those experiences. And as I'm a positive person by nature, I always try to look on the bright side of things, but there were some moments where you get some very dark thoughts. Why me? Why me? I didn't do anything wrong. Is it because I didn't exercise enough? Is it because I didn't, did I eat too much McDonald's? What did I do? Did I wait too long? Is it because I waited? I was 37 when I got pregnant. I was 38 by the time I had the baby, but I thought, did I wait too long? Is it because I waited? Like, why didn't I have a baby in my 20s like everyone else when they were, what? So yeah, all these thoughts just go through your head, and you try to make the best of it, and you try to keep yourself occupied. Like I said, I would just watch. I think I watched like 100 episodes of House Hunters International, like just
That's a good one.
just yeah, just to
Yeah.
zone out, just to turn it off, turn your brain off to not think about things. Um, so at about so in September it was my birthday. September 12th was my birthday, and I had a Zoom birthday from my hospital bed, and with my siblings and my parents, and my husband was with me, and just thinking, oh, I hope me and the baby don't share a birthday. Like just just stay pregnant, just stay pregnant, just stay pregnant.
Yeah.
Um,
Stay in there. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So then I believe my birthday was on a Monday last year. I forget, but in any case, Thursday, um, I start. Oh, no, no, no. Let me back up. Um, my water had broke um, the Friday before my birthday, and in the
Okay.
movies and on TV
And at this
shows, at
point,
this point, I'm at about 25 weeks pregnant, and all of a sudden, my water breaks. And I had always assumed your water breaks, you have a baby. That's what happens, right? Like
mhm.
that's in the movies. Oh, my water broke. Oh, and you rush to the
As
hospital.
movies will have you believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I had no
Exactly.
idea that like for some women you can continue to stay pregnant after your water breaks. It's not necessarily when you go into labor.
Mhm. Mhm.
So but at that point, like the barrier is broken. There's much more room for infection or for something else to happen. So at that point, they like hunkered down. I was put on different medications, antibiotics. They were checking on me now round the clock, coming in to check my vitals, make sure I wasn't showing any signs of labor, not having any contractions. And they said, you hopefully you could still stay pregnant even though your water broke. And I didn't understand that. I didn't get it. But I was like, okay, well, whatever you guys say, right? As I was saying, I my water broke, but I stayed pregnant for another week. So now at this point, it's a Thursday night. I'm about I'm 26 weeks pregnant, and like a few days, 26 weeks and 3 days, I think. Um, and my husband was with me. It was getting late. He had a meeting the next morning, and he's like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna start heading home." And I was like, "I don't think you should go. Why don't you just stay a little longer? It's already late." I think it was raining. I was like, "Oh, why don't you just leave in the morning?" And he goes, I have to walk the dog. I have to, do X, Y, and Z. Don't worry, mamita. Like, I love you. I'll be back, tomorrow as soon as I can." I was like, "Okay." So he left, and I tried to get some sleep, and then all of a sudden I started getting these contractions, and I was shaking and in so much pain. I don't think anything ever like if you've never been pregnant before, it's hard to describe what a contraction is or what your body is going to
Yeah.
feel. Um, so and I feel like I have a pretty high tolerance for pain, like I have tattoos and like I've gotten broken bones and stuff, but this was
Yeah.
just like a whole body, shake. So they come in, they check me, check my vitals, they check to see if I'm dilating. Um, but I was running a fever, and because my water had already broken, there was a fear that the baby might get an infection. And so they said, "We're not going to do anything to try to stop the labor. You're having your baby." So I was like, oh, "Okay." um, so scared. They all the sonograms had shown that he was healthy, considering. They didn't find any issues with his heart or with his brain or with his spine, or, everything was developing normally, but he was still so early. Um,
Mhm.
so I call my husband and I'm like, you have to come back. You have to come back right now. Good thing the hospital is only about 20 minutes away from our home. So he jumps in the car. He
Now
comes.
this is well. What time is this? Is this middle of the night?
This is like maybe 1 in the morning, I think.
Okay.
I'm a little hazy on the times,
Okay.
but
Okay.
it was definitely like
Okay.
after midnight. So now it's like Friday. So he rushes to the hospital, and I'm already out of the room. They're already bringing me to labor and delivery. Um, and they they ask me if I want an epidural. And I had, my original plan for this pregnancy was to have this natural, hippy dippy midwife, the whole thing, no medication. But at that point, we were so beyond anything that I thought my pregnancy was going to be anyway. I was like, yes, give me the epidural. And not only that, they told me that it could slow down the labor. And at that point, like every minute that he could stay inside is better. So they give me the epidural, and I fall asleep for like 4 or 5 hours. Um, I wake up, and at this point now we're in, active labor. Um, Now, like I said, this pregnancy hadn't gone according to plan. Um, the labor was not going according to plan. Um, and because he was so early, he had a whole team ready to help him, ready to be there in case anything happened, or when he came out, for them to jump in and and make sure that he didn't know that he was okay. So in my delivery room was me, my husband, and about 10 other people, maybe 10 to 15 other people.
Wow.
They had,
Okay.
because they had, the heart doctor there, the lung doctor, the this doctor, that doctor, all these specialists on site, for the chance that anything was going to happen to him, that they were all there. So it was like Grand Central Station. Like there was so much commotion, so much coming and going, so much, uh, so much going on, and
Was it freaking you out, or did you just like not care at this point? You were
I
just
at that
concerned
point,
about your
yeah, at that
baby.
point, I was just like it was kind of like an out of body experience. I was like, wow, look at that. Like there's a lot of people in here, but it wasn't anything that I was worried about. In fact, like I found it comforting because they were all ready. It was like having like you're going to war, and everyone's like ready to battle. Everyone's ready to get down and
Hmm.
dirty and do what they got to do. And my my blood pressure was dropping, and my doctor was saying, if your blood pressure keeps dropping, we're going to need to perform a cesarean. And I was like, no, no, no. That was like the one thing that I was really just like, I didn't want. I don't know why. I just like, and also because I felt like, you know your body more than anyone else. And whatever tests or this or that they do, like at the end of the day, there's this voice inside of you telling you what feels right and what doesn't feel right. And I knew he was ready to come out. I was like, we don't have time for a C-section. Like he's coming out now. Like I could feel him. I could feel him like pressing against my pubic. I could feel him coming out. So I just like bared down and pushed, and out he came. And they took him and they put him on my chest for a second. And then they took him away, and we were all in the same room. It was a huge room. It wasn't like a small little hospital room. It was this big room. And they bring him there, and they all just kind of swarm on him. And they're checking his vitals, and they're checking this, and they're checking that, and I'm trying to get a good look at him out of the corner of my eye, but all I see is the scrubs. All I see is these blue scrubs, and all of a sudden I hear him, and he gives this big scream, and I see him, and he had this big head of hair. He had so much hair, and he was nice and rosy and pink, and I just let out this sigh of relief. I was like, ah, okay, he's here, he's okay, you know. And they put him in an incubator. They wheel him over. I see him for what feels like a second, and then they take him away. And at that point, the attention comes back to me, and it's time to pass the placenta. The delivery itself, the contractions were hard. The contractions were painful. The delivery was not as painful as I think I expected it to be in my head. I think it's just because he was so little. He was so little, 2 pounds. He just shot out.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a poop.
For sure. For sure.
He just
that is like that is almost like the little bit of silver lining to the situation, I would say, versus delivering like an 8 or 10 pound baby, and you're like, ah.
Yeah, no, he came out. Once it was time to push, it felt like a few pushes and he was out. And so then they come back to me, and the placenta is just not passing. It's just not coming out. So the doctor had to kind of reach in and pull it out. And that hurt more than anything.
Right.
That was super painful. And, like I said, once I saw that something in me told me that he was okay. I had no guarantees he was okay. He was 2 pounds, he was 26 weeks. But something was like, he's okay. He's okay. He's going to be okay. He's here. So I kind of allowed myself to relax just for a minute. And, I'm kind of joking around with the nurses. And they say, we have to give you a suppository. And I say, and I was like, well, they're like, we have to put something in your butt. And I was like, well, usually I make someone buy me a drink first, but okay, you can do it. And everyone like had a big laugh, and it just like broke the tension in the room, and everyone was laughing, and it just kind of like, made things less serious, like
Okay.
I the whole time I tried to have a positive attitude in the delivery room, because, I believe like, energy feeds off of itself, and if you're stressed and
Mm-hmm.
crazy, then everyone else is going to be stressed and crazy. And I was just trying to be confident and calm as much as I could be, so that all the doctors could relax and do their job. Like, don't worry about me. I'm fine. Take care of the baby. Um,
Why? Let me ask you a question.
yeah.
Why did they have to do that procedure, like putting a suppository
I
in your
don't
butt?
know. I have no
Why?
idea. I have no idea.
I haven't heard of that part. I'm like, the baby didn't come out of there. Well, I just
I
want to know why.
I think they were maybe I think it was because I think it was they were trying to give me like
And what
medicine or
is that?
something,
Is
and
that
trying
that
to
little?
it's like a
Is
little
that that little
it looks like a
rubber
little
thing?
tampon
Like,
thing that no, it looks like a tampon. It's like a
okay,
pill, but they put it up your butt.
okay, okay,
To be honest,
cool,
I'm not sure exactly why they did
fun.
it. But like I was just trying to, I was just trying to relax and kind of break the tension a little bit. Like, he's okay, he's here, he's okay. Let's, yeah, I'm a jokester, so I was just trying to. It just popped out. I just said it. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so the doctor, the team, uh, I had, because my blood pressure was dropping, they wanted to make sure that I was stable. Um, so they said, okay, the baby is with the NICU team. They're running tests. They're checking all his vitals. It's probably going to be an hour or so before you can see him, unless something's wrong. Um,
Hmm.
So an hour or so passed, and they said that, he was ready to be seen, but I couldn't go see him because I wasn't stable enough yet.
Okay.
So I sent my husband. He went to see the baby for the first time, and I got left behind in the hospital room. And I was like, FaceTime me, like, tell me, make sure everything's okay. Like, I, so he sees the baby. He comes back. He tells me, everything's okay, and he looks good. And they got me food, and we ate, and some time passed, and then eventually I got to go see the baby. And nothing prepared me for what I was going to see. You go down to the NICU, and he was, quote unquote, like healthy. Like he was breathing, he wasn't having any distress. They had stabilized him, um, but he was so little. He like fit in your hand. And they have him in this incubator, and he's hooked up to all these machines, and there's all this beeping, and they have a breathing tube down, and it's breathing for him. And they have something covering his eyes, and I just cried. I saw him, and I just started to cry and cry. um Cry out of happiness, cry out of sadness. Like it was just such a flood of emotions. Happy that he's here, sad that these were the circumstances, you know, and I couldn't hold him. I couldn't hold him. Everyone wants to hold their baby, right? And comfort him and
Yeah.
tell him everything's going to be okay. But the most that I could do was put my hand in and, like, with one finger, kind of just like touch him.
Okay.
And it would be about a week before I could really hold him. Um, and I was in the hospital for another day or so. Um, they wanted to make sure I was stable, and my blood pressure had gone back up, and
Mhm.
and then you get discharged. And it was such
Okay.
a trippy feeling because on the one hand, I was ready to leave that hospital. I had been in that hospital for a month.
I bet.
I was ready to go home. I was ready to be in my bed and see my dog and see my cat and to be in my own house and have some fresh air. I hadn't had fresh air in a month, I was stuck in a
Yeah.
room.
You haven't seen the outside world in a whole month. I mean, I can
Exactly.
only imagine. That's yeah.
But you're leaving without your baby. You have to leave and you have to go home and you have to leave your baby behind. And, I think I was partially like still in a daze of everything. I remember being in the car and my husband lowering the window and me just sticking my head out like a dog, like just trying to get all the air and the sun that I could get. And I was just like, breathing, just trying to. And then you come home and then it kind of hits you, you know, that the room that the baby's supposed to be in is empty, and you don't have your baby with you. So it was such a
Now,
wide range of emotions.
when you were finally discharged from the hospital, what did they tell you about how long he has to stay there? How this is gonna work. Talk to me
So,
about
mhm.
that.
So, again, the NICU team, the whole hospital in general, the whole staff, everyone was uh, very comforting, very kind, and explained everything. And I had a million questions, and they were very patient with me. And basically, they said you should expect him to be here until his due date. So his due date was December 19, and he was born September 17. So under the
Wow.
best case
Okay.
scenario, he's going to be there for 2.5 months. Wait, September, October, yeah, like 3 months, 2.5, 3 months.
Yeah.
And that's the best case scenario. But they said, you
Mm-hmm.
can come visit anytime. You can come 7 days a week. You can come 24 hours a day. You can call us at any time. There's no restrictions on the parents coming to visit. Don't be afraid to call. Don't be afraid to ask anything that you want to ask. Um, so we knew that this was going to be a very long journey. Uh, and I had 6 weeks recovery for myself. Uh, and during those 6 weeks, I was at the hospital every day. Every day I was in the hospital,
Wow.
coming to visit him, coming to be with him. Um, and the NICU is a very scary place. You're walking by all the rooms and you see all these little babies, and some are bigger. They're all in different stages of their journey. Some are newly arrived, like my little guy, and people were at the end of their journey and getting ready to go home. And the
Mm-hmm.
nursing staff was always there and so I'm trying to learn how to be a new mom, in a hospital room. I'm trying to learn how to breastfeed in a NICU. I'm trying to,
Yeah.
uh, but there were, as sad and as scary as it was, there were all these little milestones, all these little victories that we would try to celebrate along the way. Um, I, most parents, these days they have like those milestone cards, oh, 1 month, and you take a little picture with your baby, or, my first time eating, or my this or that. I had found preemie milestone cards, and so it would say 27 weeks, 28 weeks, I'm 3 pounds, I'm four, all these little things. Uh, and we took every chance that we could to try to celebrate every little baby milestone that he had. Um, but it was scary because he was so little. Like I said, he was 2 pounds, 1 ounce, 13 inches. Um, couldn't hold him, couldn't comfort him. And all the doctors are there, and you hear it's like they're talking another language. You don't understand. They're talking about this level and his oxygen levels and his iron levels and his this and his that, and what they told me, a piece of advice that the doctors told me, they said, don't Google stuff. They're like, if you have questions, ask us, but if you start Googling things, you're gonna go down a rabbit hole and of things that may not be accurate, or things that may not pertain to you, or things that you're not going to understand. And it's just going to stress you out and make you crazy. And they were right, because,
Yeah.
once I did
Yeah. Google
Google
is
something.
Go- Google is a blessing and a curse when it comes to anything medical. So
Yeah,
I can completely understand why. Google always shows you the absolute worst case scenario
where's
of everything.
exactly. They would give me little updates, and I think, it would feel like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 step forward, 1 step back. Um, he ended up having a brain bleed while he was in the NICU, which they say is common for babies born at that stage. Um, and there are different levels, grade 1 to 4. I think he was like a 2, 4 being like the most severe, 1 being like the least severe. Um, and he needed X-rays, and he needed blood transfusions, and he needed, all these different types of. He had steroids. He had, um, feeding tubes. All these things that were just seemed so foreign, so crazy. And I
Let
just
me
want to
ask
be
you
with
this
my
question.
baby. Yeah.
it's like he's right there, but you can't touch him.
Right.
I mean, I can't even fathom, of course, being a mother myself, everything you're saying is like, it's like I'm imagining that experience, and to not be able to touch him, to see him in this glass thing, and all these things, and the way you said they're all speaking a different language. I
You
can't,
feel
like,
so
that's got to be the
helpless.
most confusing. Yeah,
You
and
feel
like you want to
helpless.
do more, but you
Hmm.
can't. Let me ask you this. Once you started, so you mentioned that you were learning to breastfeed him at the NICU. How did that work? At which point was he, like, was it immediately after that first week, or did he had to get to a certain point before you could, how
Um,
did that work?
so I started pumping, right after, like, the night of my delivery. So I started pumping right away. And obviously in the beginning it was very
Okay.
slow and you're only getting a few drops. But that was okay because he wasn't he couldn't take more than a few drops. Um, uh, but my it was it was very important to me because it felt like the one thing that I could do for him is to feed him. I could
Hmm.
feed my baby. And even if I can't breastfeed because
Yeah.
he's on a feeding tube and a breathing tube and all this other stuff, at least I could provide him the food. At least I could provide him what he needs. So, it was a lot of trial and error and trying to figure out a routine and a schedule and trying to get comfortable. And I would pump wherever I was, whatever I was doing. If I was in the hospital, I would pump in the hospital. And if I was at home, I'd pump at home. And I would, collect the milk and I would bring it in and I'd be like, like a kid showing off a project at school. I'm like, see, look what I did. Look what I did. Like, I'd bring in
Yeah.
all this. Um, and the NICU he had his own private room. He had his own private fridge. There was a chair there for me. So I would come in and I would, all his milk was labeled and timed and everything. And I would put it there. Um, and then, so he was taking my milk from the beginning, but it was supplemented with all this other stuff. I think we would call it baby Gatorade. It was like, these IV bags and pumping all this stuff into him. And, like, at the time I knew exactly what everything was called, but, life happens and you start it, goes more and more into the past. But
Sure.
like I said, it was like the one thing that I felt I could do for him as his mother is pump and bring him milk. And that's what I did. And I would bring him milk every day and they would use it. And then eventually they said, well, because he was only taking, an ounce, like so little in
Hmm.
the beginning. They said, we have too much, start saving at home. We'll tell you if we need more. So yeah, I was storing milk here. I had milk coming out of my ears. Like I had, it was, you know, we eventually ended up having to get like a stand-up freezer and build that milk up. As the weeks went by, he would get more and more. And like I was saying, like we would celebrate. All these little things would happen that we would celebrate. Like the first time I got to hold him. I remember like the first time they took him out of the bassinet and the incubator and put him in my arms. The first time I got to feed him with the bottle. The
When was that? When was the first time you got to hold him?
it was about a week and a half after he was born.
Okay.
But it was, I mean, he fit like in my bra. He was so tiny
Wow.
and he was still connected to all these tubes and there would be a monitor in the corner with all these numbers on it and if he got too excited, or his numbers would start to fall and then the nurses would come in and take him away from me and put him back the isolette. The nurses had to teach me how to hold him, how to, because you have to hold them a certain way. I would want to like rub his back, and they're like, don't do that, because his skin is so delicate. His skin is so sensitive. Like, just put your hand on him. Don't stroke him. And you feel kind of stupid, like you're like, oh, I don't know how to hold my baby. I don't know how to feed my baby. I don't know how to,
Yeah.
what's going on. You're relying on these strangers, to help you. And as the weeks went on, we became very close, and I knew his team, and I knew all the nurses' names, and they all knew me because I was there every day. Looking back, sometimes like it's hard for me to remember because it's like I was still like going through my own trauma and stress, post-traumatic stress, and like it felt like it was almost happening to someone else. Like I was watching it on TV, like I was watching it unfold. Um, and after 6 weeks, I had to go
Let me
back to
ask you,
work, and it was nuts.
as all of this is happening, incredibly impactful, obviously, because this is happening, that doesn't mean every other facet of your life stopped. Like
Right.
things with family, things with work, stuff like that. How did you manage to handle like that most important thing in your life, along with all the other stuff that you still had to be responsible for?
Well, to be honest, I don't know if I did. I don't know how well I don't know how good a job I did handling everything, but it was good to kind of get back into a routine. The dog still needs to get walked, and you still got to eat, and the dishes still need to get washed, and work still needs to get done. And but I was kind of just going through the motions. Like I don't know how good of an employee I was at the time, that I was like kind of just doing the bare minimum to stay off everyone's radar. Typically, you have your recovery time, and then you have your parental leave. And I wanted to save my parental leave from when he came home. So as hard as it was, I had to make the decision to go back to work and I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm one of the lucky ones that I had time, parental leave. Some people, they get that 6 weeks, or I think it's 6 weeks if you have a vaginal delivery, 8 weeks if you have a cesarean, and then you got to go back to work. That's it. You don't get anything else. I was lucky in the sense that I had the time, but at the same time, it's like no time would have been enough. Like it was never enough. Because of the pandemic, we were all working remotely. We're still working remotely. So I would bring my laptop and I would work out of the hospital room, or I would go to the hospital cafeteria, and I would be sending work emails, in between going to see the baby, coming back home, and walking the dog. And I have my my husband, I have my family, I have, my mother would come and try to nurse me and comfort me and make sure I was eating right and make sure I was taking care of myself. And I don't know if I was, it all just feels like a blur, feels like a haze. It feels like it could have been a week, it could have been 10 weeks, it could have been, like you're you're in like a fog, until your baby is home with you, you're just in this fog. And one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this in the first place is because 1 in 10 babies is born premature. And by premature, I mean before 38 weeks. Some are born at 26 weeks, like my son. Some are born at 30. Some babies are in the NICU for a day. Some of them are in there for a year. Uh, but I was so surprised. I had no idea that prematurity was such a common thing, and we just don't talk about it. Everyone goes in with the best of expectations that you're going to have this like perfect pregnancy. But again, it's 1 in 10 women have a preterm baby.
Why why do you think people don't talk about it?
I think it's wishful thinking. People want to focus on the positive.
Okay.
People want to think, well, that's not going to be me. I did everything right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that we're honest with women about everything that can happen during your pregnancy. We just focus on, everyone wants a happy ending. Everyone wants a good story. After the baby was born, he people mean well, but they don't know what to say. I would hear
Mm-hmm.
everything from, someone would tell me, "Oh, he was just in a rush to meet you. He just wanted to see you so bad." And I'm like, "Shut up." Like, shut up, you know? Like, 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 oh yeah, he has to spend, he's hooked up to a tube because he wanted to see me, you know? Or they'll say, oh, like, people would talk about religion a lot and God a lot, and they would say, well, thank God. Thank God that he's okay. Thank God that he's here. Thank God that he survived. And I'm like, he's barely surviving. He's fighting every day. Like, I don't want to feel grateful right now. You know what I mean? I'm not in a positive place to count my blessings when I see my baby breathing with a machine, not being able to survive on his own. It was very isolating because people don't know what to say to you, and people mean well, and they want to be encouraging, but really, unless you've been in that
What
situation.
do you wish? What do you wish they said? Like what do
Yeah,
you in hindsight feel like would have been, I don't know, I guess the better thing to
yeah.
say? Like would you maybe have preferred silence? Like what do you feel like would have been the better
I
thing to say?
think for me, everyone's different, and I think you have to base it on that individual person. But I think the best thing to say, or for the person to hear, is that we love you, we love your baby, and if there's anything you need, we're here for you. I can't imagine what you're going through, but I'm here if you ever need to talk or if you ever need someone to listen. And that's enough. You don't have to put a bow on it. You don't have to paint a pretty picture for me. You don't have to, well, look on the bright side. Like, at that moment, there is no bright side because I'm not with my baby. My baby's living in a hospital. People like to people like to empathize with you and tell you how they relate to your story. They'll say,
That's the
well,
worst.
my cousin's best friend had a preemie, and now he's on the varsity football team. My neighbor's nephew was a preemie, and now he's going to graduate high school. And these are all great stories, maybe to tell later. But at that
Mhm.
moment, I don't want to hear about how a preemie. At that moment, you don't know how the story is going to end. And a lot of preemies don't make it home. The reason you know
Yeah.
these stories is because they're the lucky ones. They're the happy endings. But there's no guarantee I'm going to have a happy
Mhm.
ending. I mean, everything is fine now. I can talk about it now because he's a year in
Mhm.
and he's healthy and he's happy and he's thriving. But even now, there's
So
lingering
he
issues.
so he spent a total of 100 days in the hospital after he was born, right?
He was discharged on the 100th day. Yes, he was in the
Tell
hospital
me
for 100
about
days.
that day. Tell me about that day. The day when you finally were like taking him home. Like you knew
So,
like tell me from the beginning when you woke up that
right.
morning. I want to
Well,
know.
I'm going to even go back a little further so you have some context.
Okay.
For that entire time, like I was saying, I was in the hospital every single day. Every single day. I think out of the entire period, I think there were 2 days that I couldn't go. Like I just wasn't feeling well. I was just like mentally and physically exhausted. And, my husband went in my place. Um, but I was there every day. I was there every single day. Then about So we were expecting him to come home December 19th. That was kind of like the what they were shooting for. December 19th came, and I tried not to build any expectations up in my head, but I wanted him home for Christmas. I wanted Christmas for him to be home with us. And everyone said, "Oh, he'll be home. He'll be home. He'll be your little Christmas gift and whatever." 2 weeks before he came home, or about 10 days before he came home, I should say. Again, this is in the peak of the pandemic. We're getting tested every 2, 3 days so that we can go
Mhm.
keep seeing him in the hospital. And my husband, his COVID test comes back positive. And now I can't go see him because we live together. and we're quarantining now. So now, even though I tested negative, I wasn't allowed to go see him. And that is when I broke. I had been so strong tried to be strong for so long, and when they said, you can't come see the baby, I just lost it. And I called and I said, I'll move into a hotel. I'll kick him out. I'll leave him. I will just please let me see. I'll sleep in the hospital. I'll never leave. Please, please let me see my baby. I was begging. I felt desperate. I felt like a drug addict. I felt like I was like going through withdrawals. I was like, please, please, I'll do whatever. I promise. Like I promise I'll be good. Like you could test me every 20 minutes. Like I don't care. Like please let me see the baby. But these kids are just so delicate, and it's not just Max. There are
Mm-hmm.
other kids there too. So I understand why they took so
Yeah.
many precautions, but I was devastated. Now, the nurses were incredible, and they would FaceTime me, and they would send me pictures, and they would message me, and they would put them in little outfits for me, and send me, show me. But I was a wreck. And it caused issues. Like you don't want to. My husband is so supportive, so wonderful. He was such a loving father and partner. He is a loving father and partner. Um, but I was like, it's because of you. Like, why'd you get COVID? And we're together every day. I don't know why he got it and I didn't. I don't know how it worked out. The dice fell that way. It was just like I needed someone to blame. I needed somewhere to put all this anger. I said, "Are you going to keep him until like?" And they said, "Even if the 14 days hasn't passed, if he's ready to go home, he's going home. We're not keeping him here. Like this isn't a hotel." Like when he's ready to
Okay.
leave, he goes home. So the day
Yeah.
that they released him, typically you're there in the NICU and they have a little tiny ceremony. They and make an announcement over the loudspeaker and they have a little certificate for him and everyone claps. We didn't get any of that because we weren't even allowed into the hospital. So we show up in the
Okay.
hospital and I run up like I don't even think he parked the car. Like I just like ran out of the car and I run to they had a big glass door so I could see the nurses, a glass wall. So I could see the nurses with him in the car seat and all his stuff that was in his room because he had, after 100 days, we had a lot of stuff in there and so he had all his things and I see them coming and it was like it was like they were dropping off Chinese food. Like they get to the front door, they hand him to me. Everyone's masked, no one's touching me. They're like here, and then they left. Like it was a little anticlimactic in a way, because it was like here is this delicate little guy that needs all this special care, and then they just hand him to you, and you go home. They were all very kind and we were so happy to have him. Like I was just bursting out of my skin. And so we take him, we put him in the car seat. And this was in the evening. I think we picked him up at like 6 or 7. We bring him home. My husband's driving like 10 miles an hour the entire way
Yeah.
to get home. And I, I think we just stared at him. We just stared at him. Like it just felt unreal. Because the last time I had seen him, he was in the NICU. He was in an open crib, which was a big day, because there's a lot that happens in those 100 days. He goes from one type of isolate, is what they're called, like the little incubation things, into another one, and then he gets bigger, and they could put him in an open crib, and then he gets ready to go home. And so the last time I had seen him, he was in a hospital room, still surrounded by all these machines and everything. And then the next thing I know, he's at home and he's in his crib and he's sleeping. And yeah, so it just felt so surreal. It felt like he was Pinocchio, he's like, now I'm a real boy,
Yeah.
like he's before it all felt so surreal. And then now he's finally at home in his crib, in his nursery, and we're finally together. And so that was December 27 was the day he
December.
came home. He was born
Okay.
September 17 and he came home December 27. My goodness, like I can't believe how far he's come. I can't believe that I still can't believe he's here with us. And he's a tiny little guy. When you're a preemie, they go by your adjusted age,
Okay.
meaning he's 12 months. He's been on this earth for 12 months, but developmentally, he's really more like a 9-month old
Okay.
because those 3 months that he was in the NICU, he was still baking. That's
Yeah.
time that he should have been in my oven. So they go by adjusted age until he's about a year and a half to 2 years. And then you can just, by then
Then it's the
he
same.
should have caught up enough that you just go by his actual age. Um,
What
so
was
it's
his size when you finally brought him home? How much did he weigh?
When he was born, he was 2 pounds. When he came home, he was 8 pounds. On December 27, he was 8 pounds. And now he is almost 18 pounds. Almost 18 pounds. So still a tiny guy. I was lucky that I had a lot of friends who had babies around the same time. When I got pregnant, I was, like I said, 37, 38. And I thought this was a journey that I was going to have to kind of go on by myself because most of my friends had kids 10 years earlier, you know? But both of my sister-in-laws had given birth that same year. Sabrina and Emily had given birth in February. And then I had another group of friends who had also given birth around the same time as me. So on the one hand, it was great to have that support system of other moms, other new moms going through similar situations. Um, but on the other hand, it was hard not to compare your tiny little chicken wing of a baby. They have all these like giant children, these giant rotisserie chickens floating around.
Yeah.
And it's hard, and it's still hard to compare, not to compare, all these kids are turning 1 years old now, and um, I have to keep reminding myself, well, he's not really his adjusted age. His
Hmm.
adjusted age. He's 9 months. He's 9 months. But even for 9 months, he's a little guy, and he still has some residual issues that we'll have to deal with. For example, today we went to the pulmonologist because he's more susceptible to infections, and he's had this cough that won't go away, and they're going to put him on a inhaler
Okay.
because his lungs weren't developed when he was born, and we've had to follow up with the cardiologist, the neonatologist, the high risk team, all these people that you have to follow up with. And thank goodness they're all very happy with his progress. They're very happy with how far he's come. But it's just all these little constant reminders that he was early and he went through a lot. And he's gonna have his own journey, his own path. Um, but I think back to that day in the hospital room when I heard him cry and I saw him for the first time, and I don't know if it's motherly instinct or wishful thinking or whatever it was. Something inside me told me he's gonna be okay. He's
I
gonna be
think
okay.
I think it's both. I think it's both. I think it's definitely motherly instinct and listen, I'm big on intuition and just like the messages that we receive from our guardians or whatever you want to call it, especially when you're dealing with a very delicate situation and it's that mother-child connection. If you knew, you knew. Despite the fact that this is a story that continues on, you've come such a long way, and now you have him home. He's growing. And I know the not comparing thing is
And
so hard. I mean,
yeah,
it's like,
like why is that
but
baby crawling already? But he has he's going to do great things in his own time. He's not worried about how fast I want him to do things. He's going
yeah.
to do things when he wants to do them. And to kind of bring it full circle,
Mm-hmm.
he turned a year, um, and my husband and I have talked about having a second one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a conversation that we've been having. And you think to yourself, we got so lucky with him that he doesn't have any long outstanding health issues that we know of that he's going to have to deal with. There are a lot of preemie kids who are born that early that are not so lucky, that
Yeah.
have neurological issues, physical issues, developmental issues, and we wonder, like, are we rolling the dice? Are we pushing our luck?
Hmm.
Um, but that's also, you could have a healthy baby, a
Yeah.
full-term baby. You could have a full-term 40-week baby, and there's no guarantee that the next one will be healthy either. At a certain point, you have to do what you think is best and trust your instincts and hope for the best. Um, but tomorrow, actually, I have an appointment with the high-risk doctors to discuss possibly getting pregnant again and what my risk factors are and
Okay.
what preemptive measures we can take to possibly improve my chances of not having another preemie. But realistically, it'll probably be another premature baby if I get pregnant again. I mean, hopefully,
Okay.
it'll be longer. Maybe they'll
Hmm.
have to put me on bed rest sooner. They might do the cerclage at 12 weeks instead of 20 weeks. This is what we'll all discuss, and at least this time around, whatever we decide, whether we decide to try or not try, or just stay with one and that be it, at least we're going into it with a better idea, better understanding of
Hmm.
what the road ahead looks like. Um, like we've been saying, most women get pregnant and hope for the best, and most women have full-term healthy babies, but it's just something we don't talk about. We don't talk about,
Absolutely.
or we talk about it after, when it's too late.
If you knew of another woman that was going to experience something similar, what is there any specific things that you wish that women that could be in your position knew? Like anything that you could say to them, I don't know, any particular word of advice or anything that you feel like you could have handled differently, anything along those lines.
Um, it's hard to say because everyone's journey is so individual. Um, but to keep reminding yourself that you're doing your best, that there's nothing that you did. This isn't a punishment. This isn't your fault. Uh,
Okay.
this is just the luck of the draw, you know. I personally am not one who believes in fate or
Okay.
destiny. I think that so much of our lives is ruled by luck, by the luck of the draw. If Max had been born in a different city, in a different town, in a different state, in a different country, it might have been a completely different story. We were lucky that we live 20 minutes from one of the best NICU hospitals in the country.
Yeah.
We're lucky that we're born in the United States where you have, a health system that's advanced, that he wasn't born in a developing world, in a developing nation. I was lucky that I had prenatal care that was able to keep me as healthy as they could for as long as they could. But even saying that to someone as a mother, you always internalize things. You always put it on yourself because you're the mom. He was, they're inside of you. If another woman knew that they were expecting or that they had uh, a chance of having a early term baby, I would just tell them to take care of themselves because if you're not in the right place mentally, physically, then you're not going to be able to take care of that child. So whether it's trying to get, enough sleep, enough rest, getting help from people, not feeling like you have to do everything on your own, not feeling like you have to be the superwoman to overcompensate because, well, I had an early baby, but look at all the things that I did. I did this and I did that, and you don't have to do it all. You're doing enough. You're enough. And whatever journey your baby will be on, your baby is going to love you.
I
And
think
that's all that
that's
matters.
I I think that's absolutely beautifully said. I absolutely agree with that advice. I think as moms, regardless of what situations we go through with our children, the one thing that certainly unites us is this mindset of like we're not doing enough, we're not being enough, we're
Hmm.
not cooking enough, we're not breastfeeding enough. There's always something,
Yeah.
especially when you start looking at other moms and how they're handling things, and you always kind of feel like you're lacking something. So, no, I think that's tremendous advice and it's incredibly valuable. I just have one last question for
Sure.
you. What do you hope to accomplish by sharing your story? Like, what do you hope comes out of you putting comes out of the fact that you have decided to be brave enough and generous enough to share this with the world?
I think that if even one person hears my story and feels less alone in their journey, then it would have been worth it. Um, Again, it's something that happens so much more frequently than we think about. 1 in 10 women will have a premature baby,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a club that no one wants to be a member of. But once you're in the club, it's incredibly supportive. You're not alone. There are other moms out there going through the same thing that you're going through, and just what every mom has in common is that we're all just hoping for the best, wishing for the best, trying our best. So yeah, I had never known anyone who had had a preemie baby beforehand because it was not something that was talked about. Now I know, oh yeah, did you know this person, that person? Oh yeah, they did have a preemie. So again, I just want women to know that it's much more common than we think, and that you're not alone in your journey. And there are resources and support out there for you. I know for me, the March of Dimes was an organization that was incredibly supportive and helpful for me, especially
Mm-hmm.
at a time when people couldn't be in the NICU. I would come into the room and they would have little gifts for me, or they would have team members come and talk to me and share their stories before I delivered and after I delivered. There is a support system out there. There are people there who want to help and be there for you, and don't be afraid to ask for that help.
Yeah, yeah, no, beautifully said. Again, that's kind of the whole point of this platform that we're building here is human connection. Let's share human stories. Let's share the things that we all experience that we don't talk about. And you might be surprised. You might already know women who went through this kind of thing and they just never mentioned anything. And that's what I'm learning as I go along and speak to different women. I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your very, very busy life to sit down and talk to me. It was amazing to hear your personal experience. I appreciate you. And I hope that, as you said, I hope that we can put it out there. And if we can get one person to listen and one person to relate and feel better, we've done our job.
Well,
That's how I feel.
I want to thank you because you're giving women a platform to speak and share their stories when maybe they don't feel like anyone is listening, or that they don't have something to say. And whatever your story is, it is valid, and we're all connected in this motherhood, this sisterhood. And I thank you for listening and making me feel heard.